Hi, this is Leanne with Markigy. Today I'm joined by Will Taylor. He's going to tell us about his background to color his point of view for the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm glad that you reached out and that we have a similar alignment on how marketing is changing in the modern world. I'm Will Taylor. I have a background in psychology, which is relevant for the conversation that we'll get into. But the main sentiment that I want to share with people is like, I didn't go to school for business. I am obsessed with how people interact. And that's come through in my experience. I got into sales and then I fell into doing business partnerships, which was like sales and marketing on steroids. And it was a really interesting interaction that I found both on the sales and marketing front for producing value for buyers, but then also for me and what I care about most is how people are interacting and how buyers are actually buying from a psychological standpoint. And so I did some partnerships, a bunch of different companies, worked at a partnerships media company, and then we were acquired by a partnerships technology company. And I was just consuming all of this information around the idea of partnerships and ecosystem and the idea of trust being translated throughout these networks of individuals and businesses. And that is what we call the ecosystem at large that buyers are interacting in. And I became more and more obsessed with this. And I'm like, okay, this is where my career is set, and I'm going to try and build a business in this. And a year and a few months in now, we have built a successful marketing agency working with organizations to help engage the ecosystem. And our tagline is go to market with your market, because otherwise you're just shouting at them. And I got a bunch of analogies for that, but that's my quick background on how I got here today. And I wouldn't say I'm the traditional career marketer, because I do take that, starting in sales, getting into partnerships lens, but I have had marketing sprinkled throughout my career, being a partner marketer and then working at the media company as well. So it's kind of like ingrained in how I do things.
I love it. And I think that that's where we really had some resonance is the foundation of how do people connect. And I think without that, any of our marketing motions, or if we aren't really speaking to our customers in a way that matters, then why do they care? Maybe they don't. So I want to hear from you in your own words. If there was like the hill that you were going to die on, or like your soapbox, or like what is the like main tenet that like if people miss this, they just are not understanding what they're doing and they're just off the mark. What is that one thing?
The one thing would be that inherently people buy from people that they trust. And that's a saying that we've heard, but it's more important than ever, because in a world where anyone can create any level of quality of content at any volume, the thing that is going to be your moat is the relational aspect of who is actually delivering the message. And so if all of your competitors can create all the same content or go to market effectively through all the same channels with all the same messaging, because AI is just going to help them do that at whatever volume they can afford. The differentiator is your buyers are going to be overwhelmed. And so if you're trying to reach them with the same message in the same channels without this idea of trust, then I'm very confident in saying that your business will not survive. And the same goes for sales. The same goes for delivering success to clients. It's across the board, because at the end of the day, your buyers are humans. And if they are only having a certain amount of attention credits throughout their day, and they're scrolling on, Instagram or X or wherever they choose to scroll, all of those attention credits are already spent. And you're either going to gamify their attention like those algorithms do, or you're going to really capture it and resonate with them. And that's where this trust quotient comes into play, where people will organically direct their attention through these trusted channels. And that's why there's more of an engagement with communities and in-person events, because that's what that enables. And so if you're not activating the people buy from people they trust, not just brands, brand trust is important, but people that they trust already, then you're going to be behind if you're just trying to optimize for creating more content and blasting SEO and whatnot. Those are important, but if you're doing it with others, then you're going to have much more return on investment.
Yeah, I agree so strongly. One of the things I want to pull out from what you said is that last bit of with others, and that it didn't matter, whether you were in sales or marketing or what component or what channel or function within organization you do, is that it is the relation between two human beings. And so when you're talking about trust in these kind of situations and interactions within organizations, what's a small story that helps us understand the nuance of this? Because we always, to your point, know that trust is important, right? How do we build trust? But what does that actually look like? How would it be manifested?
Yeah, so I have a few personal examples that people can likely resonate with. The first one is if you're trying to buy a car and your friends talk about the cars that they own and just how great they are, how good the model is and the brand, you're of course going to be more likely to choose that brand. But if you say brought a few options to your friends or your family or whoever you get advice from on making a big purchasing decision, they're likely going to make a recommendation in some form, and that's going to guide your decision. So generally speaking, when you're trying to make a big purchase as an individual, you naturally go through this. And the way this actually most directly manifests is if you're working with a contractor or a plumber, someone comes in, an electrician comes to your house and you have another issue, you're probably going to ask them because they're more tapped into the space of the other contractors and people who work on homes. And you're likely going to ask them, hey, do you know anyone that can help me with this? Or maybe you just bought a new home. I just bought a new home. I go to my realtor because my realtor is going to have recommendations. And I don't know that much about the area or who the best is. I go to my realtor because they're helping me out. And I only made my transaction through my realtor for things like my home inspection, for my lawyer, insurance that's locally available. And so this is an organic thing. So not only do you feel this every single day when you're trying to make purchases or really navigating what's around you, this is the reality, especially for larger and larger purchases. So the reason I made the example of the car is because that's a big purchase for individuals. Now, if we apply that lens to business, the same is to be said because it is a large purchase. And if you are selling even a mid-market or enterprise solution, if it's $10 to $50 to $100,000 a year, that could be someone's career on the line. And so they're going to want to make a good decision, and they're going to see what the experiences of others are like, not just the vendor speak that exists. And so a professional example very quickly is we ran a program for a client and we helped them produce some content with a third-party expert. We distributed it through that person on social, and it brought in a Honeywell, an enterprise company that this client of ours, relatively small, sells to enterprise, doesn't really have a big brand yet. If they were trying to go direct to Honeywell, they probably wouldn't have gotten access to them. But they came inbound because of the interaction with the third party that clearly the person at Honeywell already trusted. So not only do we go through this every single day and when we're going through big purchases or navigating life at large in terms of our purchases, but it's exactly how buyers go through their journey as well. And the reason for that, again, is because the stakes are potentially even higher than buying a car for your personal self. You could lose your job if you make the wrong enterprise purchase.
Yeah, definitely. I took a couple notes of some things I want to pull out from what you said. So let's start at the top, right? So you're giving us some clear examples of where people go to someone who has deeper expertise, because one of the things that I think is part of how people are social animals is we know we can't be all of the things all the time to everyone. And so there are things that make us overwhelmed or uncomfortable or anxious. And in those moments, we seek comfort. The way that we seek comfort is by going to someone that is confident in what they're saying because they must know the answer. And that's usually the expert. So, I mean, to your point, it must have felt much more comfortable to ask the realtor, hey, the landmines that I don't want to step on, just thinking of that makes me anxious. What are they? Who should I go to instead for that? Because you've heard the stories behind the scenes. You have that tacit knowledge of the landscape that I just have not spent the time in to have.
And not only is there that emotional effect, but there's the like, I'm someone who's like tries to be as productive as possible. It's actually efficient to do this as well. Going to my realtor and they have a short list of 3 lawyers, 3 contractors, 3 home inspectors. Great. Now I don't have to do the searching. I don't have to do like the qualification of, is this the right person? Is this the right price? Like I'll take all 3 of those, contact all of them, and that's probably a good enough sample size. So yeah, you're absolutely right on the emotional side. But then also there's like that efficiency piece, and people who are either business owners or leaders out there who are making these purchasing decisions, they're also short for time as well. They also experience that anxiety of making the right decision. And so if they, for example, see one of their peers engaging with a community or purchasing a vendor and advocating for a vendor, then they're much more likely to trust that, because inherently in all of this interaction, people need to save face in some form. They need to show that they're an expert. They need to maintain some level of integrity. And so there's that emotional aspect as well of the person who is being trusted. Inherently, they need to be giving value, or else they'll lose that trust with either their audience or their relationships at large. And so the integrity piece with those third parties as that validation is very important. And yeah, the emotional aspect is going to be driving all of that. Making a big decision, purchasing decision within a business, that's anxiety inducing. Because again, if you lose your job because of it, or you don't see the ROI that you were expecting, that could cost you your role. And that's like one of the biggest drivers of keeping people, motivated to make the right decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we've all worked out an organization, or maybe just me, where there's someone who maybe they didn't lose their job because they chose a bad vendor, but it turned into a legacy of the entire company and changed the trajectory. Like, let's say an organization picked a CRM that was like no good, and then no one adopted it. And then now the board of directors, all the way to the ICs, are just like, well, we tried that before. And so it's not just that that person might lose their job, but like, to your point about saving face, is that now there's like maybe 300 people that all think that you can't make good choices, and that's going to follow you. And that's hard. It's okay to make small mistakes, but when you make really big ones, it can be very impactful to very many people. I want to kind of also talk about the change from inbound, right? So how the trust and the expert like attracted others, and you were kind of starting to talk about that a little bit. Can we keep going there?
Yes. So the shift from inbound, it's essentially, I don't want to bring in too much narrative because I was part of, again, a media company that talked about this, but it explained it so well. Basically, there were different eras of how you could reach buyers. The ZERP era helped to create Salesforce, and Salesforce helped to create the SDR motion or the BDR motion. So outbound was very prolific. It became this repeatable motion because you could say, oh, I just need to call this many people or cold email this many people. And the inbox at the time wasn't as flooded. But then it started to get flooded. And then HubSpot came to the scene and said, now let's do inbound. Why not get people to come to you, produce value, and create this interconnected web? And you're going to have people that are coming to you. But just as the email inbox got flooded, so did SEO, and of course, all the things that would drive inbound. And so now there's, Forbes writing about every single thing under the sun, eating up all the SEO to rank for number one. And whether it's valuable or not, if you're a vendor that is trying to rank for that, with more competitors than ever, because it's easier than ever to start a business, with AI to write all that content and optimize the best practices, now inbound is also flooded. So the translation into what's next is at the media company, we called it nearbound. Find those who are near to you, go through those who are near to you to translate value within the ecosystem. But ultimately, that's the evolution where you still need to do outbound and inbound, but you need to layer in this idea of ecosystem or who else is out there, because why would you try and either recreate the wheel when you could ride the coattails of either another vendor, an influencer, leverage your peers and your network. All of those things can be these channels that you can activate. And even more than channels, because it's going to produce actual tangible value, especially in the case of, let's say, if you're doing a formal partnership with another tech vendor and your solutions integrate, you're now translating value. So that's like, I would say, a short history of how those different phases happened within the business world. And whether we call it nearbound or ecosystem, whatever it is, we just now need to layer in this idea of networks and how trust is being translated throughout. But that's very broad. What's going through your mind as I'm bringing through those eras?
No, I think you're right. And I love that you went through the history of it, because what I'm trying to pull the thread on is that part where now partnerships are the way to get that inbound request. It is the way to get that person to come to you in the truest sense of being a hand raiser, being like the opt-in, being the I see the value. And I think that that's something that you really highlighted, was that it's that value and that trust and the like, this is how it was. Now there's too much junk, and then there's more junk, and people don't want junk. They want the value. And so where my bias is, or like spring 2026, is very much that the value that we can establish for our potential customers is inherently improved when we have other people agreeing that it is valuable.
And you need that agreement, and like it needs to be in some way like formalized. But honestly, this is what I love about the idea of like partnerships or ecosystem or networks is it's protected, meaning the trust is going to be held very closely, much like when you try to go to your customer success team and say, hey, we want to do some content with customers. They're going to go, wait a sec, that's my relationship. I have numbers to hit. And what are you going to do? It's going to be asking them to do things and take them away from seeing success with our platform. Obviously, there are ways to navigate that, but that's a good example of that protected trust where everyone faces that when they reach their customer success team. And the same is true if you're working with a partner. And so let's say there's a really big consultancy firm or a really big agency, and you're a tech vendor and you go to that agency. You could have the best thing since sliced bread, but if you are not helping them protect that trusted relationship that this large agency has with their clients, you're not going to get access to that relationship, because one, they have their own business incentive to look good and advise appropriately and deliver tangible value to their clients. But also, if it's not clear and it doesn't actually even help them, then you're not earning their trust as well. And so the inherent nature of partnerships is going to protect the value in the interaction, because someone else's skin is on the line and the reputation could be at risk, and potentially even their business and their metrics. And so that's where, when I think about, okay, if let's say the VC crowd really tries to jump in on this go-to-market function of partnerships, which they are opening their eyes more to, it needs to be very, very methodical in how they go about it, because it's not an easy button, much like, oh, just buy more ads, or, oh, just pay an SEO agency. oh, let's just hire more SDRs. Those are all scalable functions when you throw money at it. And the ecosystem approach, yes, you can throw money at it, but that's not going to necessarily translate that value that's needed. You need a certain level of strategy, and perfect for this conversation, for the marketers in the audience. And it's like your solution has to actually produce the value that you say it does. And if you need help getting that message out, then this is where these partners can help out. But ultimately, yeah, going back to where the interaction is protected, I won't get too philosophical in this, but like that was kind of my gripe with the corporate world was, oh, it just looks like they're spamming people. And that's how they're building their business. And that didn't really feel right. The reason it resonates with me to go to market in a more value-oriented way, a more human way, is you're not spamming them. You're not just trying to take advantage of the algorithm or the powers that be that drive SEO or ads or outbound or whatever, throw money at it. You actually have to help. And you actually have to focus on the individual and what the outcomes are in place for them. And so, yeah, again, won't get too philosophical, but that's like what is inherently awesome about this, but also that does add some complexity as well. But once you start to navigate that better, you're going to ultimately engage the buyers how they want to be engaged.
Yeah. And I would argue the complexity is always there. It's just whether or not it's given any credibility or attention. So, to your point, like, yeah, they are throwing money at it and spamming it. And then their results are relative to how much money you're throwing at something, which people aren't really like either, like it's not great. If you spend $1,000 on bad marketing, you will get less far than if you spend $100 on something that is powerful. And that's something I'll take to my grave.
Yeah. Well, and everything's more expensive now as well. Like CAC is higher, ads are more expensive, SEO is harder generally to rank for, unless if you're, at the cutting edge of AEO and everything. But most businesses aren't in that state. And it's still relatively expensive because if someone has actually cracked the code, they're probably charging a good amount for it. So yeah, I would say like the value, especially in the old world, it was growth at all costs for the most part. And so they didn't necessarily care as much about retaining the revenue. But now, whether the CROs out there or CFOs out there actually are practicing this or not, the idea of like NRR versus just ARR growth is, in my mind, I'm like, of course you should be retaining your revenue. It's easier to retain revenue than it is to penetrate into new accounts. And so that shift, I feel it happening both from the VC world as well as some of the some of the CROs and CFOs that have had their career in more of the ZERP era. But yeah, it's like if you spend some money to work with your customer to deliver them value and create content out of it with them, it's like that's going to buy you a loyal customer as well. And maybe that was less than the ad spend you would have spent to try and acquire new. And now this customer, one, they have a closer relationship with you, so the trust is higher. But two, you had more of an opportunity to present them with potentially new value, new ways of using your solution, or an opportunity to adopt new features or what have you. And so that focus on the customer or the human that you're trying to reach, whether that is the net new or the retention of your revenue, if you focus in on them, like I assure you, your competitor is not focusing on the individual human as much because they're just as stressed and pressed to make their numbers happen in a world where it feels impossible. And so there's, some reframing that needs to be done in everyone's minds, both from like the ICs as well as leadership. But ultimately, if you focus in on the buyer specifically and their world, who they trust, what their day-to-day is like, I mean, that's just good marketing. And everyone knows that, but we're pressed and pressured for getting the SEO ranked, because that's what the board cares about, even if we believe otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot of education that needs to happen internally. But that's a whole different episode where we, wax poetic about internal marketing. So one of the things, though, is that I really like that you called out the difference between growth at all costs and how that was objectively kind of very short term, right? And I think that, to your point, everyone listening, I will hope, but I will double down on this, is that it is cheaper to retain your customers, and it will enhance your brand to show them and delight them, because then they are less stressed and pressed, then they are happier, then they are more likely to be like, oh my God, what a lifesaver. Let me tell so-and-so at the water cooler or Slack channel, or, and so those are the sticky moments that, we chase, I hope, as professionals. And so I think that that's so powerful, is when you really take the time and effort to delight a customer, and it's just part of the intentional standard operating procedure, because it can be, and it's so easy to make it smooth and exist and not leave that on the table. Or we could just do our jobs right, there's that. So whenever we have these discussions, I always have to ask for the extra layers of nuance. Like, when is this maybe like not the right fit? I struggle to think of a time where it's not the right fit, but if we look at like a teeny tiny company and an enterprise Fortune 100 company, is there a situation where you're like, no, this strategy just isn't going to work for you? Or if you're going to make it work, you have to do it like this, that, and the other?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always the answer is it depends. I think the way I like to think about it when I advise people on even just their broader partnership strategy is, I always go back to revenue architecture by Winning by Design. They have a really good way of framing things and organizing the information in the way of like, are you an enterprise sale where it is lengthy and you need customer success, and maybe there's an implementation manager that comes in on the sale, and it's like this very high ticket, complex, multiple moving parts. That is going to require, one, a certain partner type, but two, a certain way of marketing to that specific buyer. And then the contrast to that is, if you're a small company and you're PLG and people can sign up for free, and it's less hands-on, they maybe even service themselves after they sign up. That's a much different way that you engage with the buyer, because you fit a different piece of the puzzle, and that puzzle piece may be larger or smaller depending on your actual solution set. So in general, the way I've simplified it is, marketing with your market and or using this ecosystem strategy does apply to every organization from a marketing sense. It's always good marketing to market with your customers, market with the influencers or community owners or other vendors that work with the buyer. And it's effectively free awareness and distribution with and through those other partners. And obviously you need to give that to your partners as well, because it's going to help out your buyer. And so it's inherently valuable. So, give a little space on your website, in your newsletter, to others, and that will allow you to ask for that from others as well. So generally speaking, marketing does apply to every organization in this way. Now, you'll face varying levels of difficulty in maybe reaching that specific customer, because maybe they don't like to participate in content, or if they're an enterprise organization, they may hesitate because there's legal aspects to it. So I would say generally people can skew more to the partnering world, because again, if there's another business out there that is trying to reach that same buyer, and you're not competitive with them, go to market together. Even if you don't integrate your solutions, you're trying to talk to the same buyer, likely on the same problem space. And so go to events with them, create content with them, host a webinar with them. Again, more value. It reduces your own bias as well, because it brings in that third party that will either validate your narratives or problem space, or at least, check you, and they have to talk about their solution as well. So share the marketing space. When it comes to like deeper engagements, the closer the relationship needed, I would say as an organization matures, that's when a deeper partnership strategy can really make sense, where maybe your solutions are deeper integrated. Maybe that agency can actually service your solution, and so they have a business incentive to build emotion around it. And you've built the necessary enablement for that as well, which would require a lot more resources and so you need to be a larger, more mature organization. So across the board, definitely everyone should be co-marketing. And the more resources and maturity you have, the deeper you can go, essentially. So if I were to put it into like marketing speak, although it may be a bit dated, generally top of funnel activities, you can do that across the board with nearly any kind of partner at any stage of company. The closer you get to the bottom of funnel, I would say you should just be aware that you probably need more resources to really enable, because the messaging needs to be much deeper and much more clear. So that was it depends answer, but also I hope that inspires people to say, even if you're a small organization or a big organization, go to market with others that are not in your company, and everyone can do it. Because if you're running any kind of marketing, just think, who else could I include in this that doesn't work for us? Is there an influencer? Are there consultants? One of our customers, one of my past colleagues, whatever it is, try and bring them in, because it will be that social validation on that narrative that you're bringing to market.
Yeah. And I always love the analogy of the for me, Diet Coke, but like Diet Coke and Pizza Hut, or, whatever, like fast food and soda beverage, they're complementary, but they make the full meal. And we should look for opportunities to do that for our customers, because they want the full meal and they like us more when they can associate us with an end-to-end solution, or at least a full meal. Maybe not everybody eats pizza, but all the pizza lovers will now be drinking your soda with it that day.
Nice.
So it always depends. And that's why we include that question, is because if there is something that's so universal that it doesn't depend, then, we really have to have a good reason for it. And, I think that fuels the conversation. So I'm going to kind of shift gears. So if we had to look forward into the future of marketing, what would you say the future is? Do you think that's what it should be? Kind of like, where do you think that things are in that kind of general area?
The future of marketing is going to be much more network driven, and the indicators outside of all the like businessy partnership stuff is pointing to like, we are more disconnected than ever despite all the technology, and people are craving more connection. That's why there's been a massive upswing in in-person events, because people are wanting to go back to that. My generation is like, I want to build like community housing so that we can live with our friends, and we want to, grow our own food. And there's even this thing that my friends do, which is called Friend Church, where it's, neither religious nor formal in any sense. It's really just, let's build friendships together. And the reason for that, socioculturally speaking, is, we've lost the third spaces. A lot of people don't work in an office, although there is some back to work. I don't think remote's going anywhere. If you're at home all day, you're probably not going to an office, and you're probably not going to even a community center as well, or those local places that you may have gone before. So what that tells me is, if you want to capitalize on the opportunity and how that opportunity will be only more and more established into the future is focus on what brings individuals together, what builds community. And so my future outlook is there's going to be a lot more network and community driven activities, whether it's in person or virtual communities, because people are craving that. And I would even say micro communities as well, because we all get lost in the giant Slack group that's 50,000 people and then no one takes action. I'm in way too many myself, but I'm in a bunch of group chats and different personas in each group. And that's just how I'm able to, process the information in my brain. So the future looks like network and community driven marketing activities in person. And also, there's a trend of needing to have more than a resume. And I'm seeing this, especially in the go-to-market function. People are more inclined to participate in content and be featured, whether it's your customer or, that individual that eventually went out on their own because they got let go because of AI. Well, now they're doing their own thing. And so there's more of an inclination in that regard. So if you're giving people those opportunities, then that is going to, make them feel good, but also actually impact their potential day to day, especially with that knowledge share in the networks and communities. So, long-winded way of saying it's going to be network and community driven only more and more as AI dominates the slop of the internet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then also from a trend spotting kind of POV is that I currently reside in a place where a lot of trends tend to start. And there has just been a massive amount of these small micro niche interest-based communities that are just popping up. Whether it's let's have a tea party or let's, have this type of book club or, and there's one for all interests. So I'm just picking out ones that show up in my feed because I live a very wholesome life. But it's really fascinating to see what you're experiencing in your POV reflected in an economic way, that it is, whether it's podcasting like how I do for community or Slack channels or these niche groups or even LinkedIn, I think has really been able to leverage people connecting people. I agree completely that you're right. The in this age of the loneliness epidemic, that people are seeking connection more and more. And they crave the stability of reliable social connections because we're social creatures.
That's right. And the other element that is very interesting is there's investment in this as well.
Yeah.
On the partnerships technology side, there's actually an acquisition that happened just yesterday that I found. It's there's more money being pumped into this thing in the business world, but also, again, maybe my algorithm's biased, but all my friends are talking about building the commune together as a joke, and it's that's a very real thing that is happening. And so the investment into those things, even on the non-business side, is also happening. And so, I mean, where there's demand for things, that's where the economics will flow in terms of people building businesses. So there are too many indicators that point in this way, and I'm biased because I love this stuff, but I'm okay, well, that's validation in multiple different formats, everywhere from macroeconomics to the culture to social to even generational, and even in some of the media that we consume and the media that is produced. So yeah, this is I'm fully tapped in to this, and it just makes sense because, again, like you said, we're social creatures. We are akin to the tribe, and we trust those that are in similar roles as we are or at similar stages of life. And so how could that not also make sense in the business world? We've lost that. It kind of used to be like that. You go on the golf course and close the deal, but are as many people on the golf course anymore? Probably not. And so we're needing to be brought back to this human element. And again, that brings me back to the psychology side of things. And that's why I'm obsessed with this, because if we can learn this, then we can learn, how we can engage with our peers, our friends in better ways, and, help people, which feels pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And the intention behind it, right, is I think that there is this more socio-emotional fluency than there's ever been before. And I'm so excited that we can say, I intentionally care about building relationships. Whereas, we're so privileged to be able to say that, because like during the depression of like the 20s or like the Dust Bowl, that was just a conversation you were not afforded because you had higher pressing survival needs. And so it really reflects how far we've come to be able to have these conversations. And it's so amazing that it is just part of the culture now, from a historical POV. All right. Last question. What is a question someone should ask you, but they don't?
People should ask me what it means to build trust. One, because we'll have an interesting conversation, but two, because I haven't fully cracked the code on it. There's books about it. I recommend The Speed of Trust. I forget who wrote it, which I'm ashamed of, but I read most of it and it structures it very well. But yeah, we should be asking everyone in general what builds trust. But if you want an interesting conversation, come talk to me about that, and we'll jam on it, because I got some theories. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing, that anyone, be it individual or the CEO of a 2,000, 10,000 person company, that's what we need to be understanding today.
Yeah, especially the CEO of a 10,000 person company.
Yes.
Please. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If someone wanted to continue the conversations and hit you up to talk about trust, they would find you on LinkedIn, or how would they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Yes, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm active there. And if I don't respond there, I'm on email, will@audienceled.com. Happy to have any kind of chat. And we also run our own content series. So we're eating our own dog food. So if you're interested in just jamming about this live and want some content out of it, come talk to me.
Awesome. If anyone wants to continue the conversation with me, I can be reached at info@markigy, markigy.com. And I always appreciate when people like, review, and subscribe and do all the stuff that feeds those beautiful algorithms. Thank you so much. Okay. We'll count that as done, even though it's still recording like we talked about.
Cool. Sounds good. How do you feel?
I feel good. I think that's a great episode. I do this because I nerd out on this. This is the conversations I want to have. This is what I do with my free will.
Very good. As we should, because we covered it, but it's like such an important topic. I held back a little bit from like mental health crisis and all that stuff. I feel like I covered good business plus psychological, sociological trends and whatnot. But yeah, I studied psychology. I wanted to be a therapist. I should have put that in my intro, but like that's ultimately what I care about. And if I've basically come to the conclusion that the like social network is what will save people and enable people to like become the best versions of themselves. So the same can be said for business, and business is the playground that we're able to, be forced to really make it efficient and effective. And then we can take that to the real world and then apply those lessons, because that's where it matters most.
Yeah. I agree heavily. Part of my graduate coursework was sports psychology. So I'm always just like, always thinking about like what is like peeling back the layers of what's happening in someone's head during those conversations. And I think it just, the psychology aspect of it informs so much of our personal interactions, whether it's professional or I think that we pretend that there's these arbitrary lines, and all there is just code switching.
Yeah.
I mean, professionalism is professionalism, but at the same time, I think when you work with people long enough, it kind of becomes a wider spectrum of interactions.
And I honestly think that rounds out the idea of like, how do you trust someone? Well, if you're only ever talking business, and even if you're producing results, like if you compare that interaction of producing value and results, which builds a certain form of trust, but then there's another person who's doing the same and they ask about, your family or how your weekend was and like the more relational aspects, I 10 times out of 10 would say that the person in camp B is going to build more trust. Different kind of trust, but it's necessary. And so if, like you said, if you're, around people or work with people throughout your entire career, those things will just naturally come up. And that's what's going to build that trust. And that's why there are like bad sides of this. Like that's how nepotism comes into play to a certain degree. Cause like, if you have a son or a daughter and they need a job, like you have your own version of emotional trust with them. But I think it's still necessary for the translation of value because it's efficient and, all the things that we talked about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's also that, like, to your point of someone who's asking about like the personal life, is that it breaks down like the walls. And I think that when we are so curated and so manicured, that it feels like AI slop. Like it feels the same way where it's fake. And we're like, but I don't really know you. Like I don't know enough about you to know X, Y, and Z. But when you start to talk about personal life or different things, like I think our brains are hardwired to have that pattern recognition of just that safety.
Yes.
Because it's a richer conversation.
Yes. I had a thought, but I just lost it. What was it about? It was about, and that's why I like storytelling. It's always going to be oriented around storytelling. You can have all the data in the world, but if you're not telling a story around it or your own story, then it's just anyone can get that data. It doesn't have that personal element to it. That's something that I learned because I was very data oriented, but then, posting on LinkedIn and creating content, I was like, why doesn't this resonate? This shows clear ROI, but it was lacking the story. So I learned my lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn is a funny place. Sometimes I think the most just frivolous posts that I post are the ones that get the biggest reactions. And I'm like, guys,
yeah.
Could we just pay attention when I say something smart? And they're like, no, we care about the GIF.
Yeah. I need to post more GIFs.
Just Nick powers it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to follow up on our previous conversation. So how did things kind of vibrate after the four of us talked? Like what was kind of the consensus?
Yeah, the vibe was definitely, we like her demeanor and we need a chance to work together. It just basically needs to be what we talked about essentially, which was like, it should be the first opportunity that we get to work together. We should. And the way that is accelerated is we close our own business within the realms of your expertise and or the relationships that you already have. So it was basically what we expressed on the call. Highly positive sentiment overall, and both were impressed as well, I would say. So we just got to figure it out. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
What about you? What's your vibe, reaction?
I like them. Obviously, I'm really excited. Anytime when she asked me about like talking about workflows, like, yes, please, I would love to. Like,
Mhm.
you cannot get me to shut up about it because I'm so proud of it and because I get really great feedback from, at least my podcast guests. They're like, wow, like I posted it on LinkedIn a couple days ago, got 0 views almost. But like one of the CROs, she's like, and your follow-up thing is fab. And I was like, yes. So one of my things to do this week is just to like, as I've been doing outreach for the podcast, people are saying some like really positive things, and I'm just
Hmm.
screenshotting it, and I'm just gonna start blasting it all
Okay.
over. Um, and I think that that's one of those opportunities that sometimes I miss, and I take it for the warm fuzzy in the moment. Um, but I digress. So to the point is I really like the demeanor, the way like ideas and thoughts are communicated within the group. I think that there's a lot of alignment in the foundational premise of like the work, which is sorry, the landscapers.
Oh, yeah.
Um, which I think is really impactful. What I'm willing to do on my part is to spend a I don't want to call it a sliver, but spend some intentional time I'm looking for ways or accounts that would make sense for us to work together on.
Mhm.
Um, I think that there is opportunity there from a business standpoint too. So as far as like next steps, I want to make sure that communication maintains open and
Mhm.
like there's like a pathway. Um, he talked about like talking through kind of like your systems or your
Yeah.
your stuff. Does that make sense, or what do you think next steps should be? What
Yeah.
feels right?
Yeah. So I have already gotten like a short list. I went through who you're connected to on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. And so I have like a short list of people. And like we discussed,
Perfect.
like if there's opportunity for you first, you go for it. Like no, literally no expectations. And if it only guides you to, speaking to those people, then great. Um, and with that, I think what we should do, I can send that over, that list of like interesting people that fit our ICP.
Yeah.
And then you can be like, yeah, out of the, I forget how many there are, out of the 15 or whatever, here are the 5 that, I know a bit more. Then we could workshop after we talk about the process to give you that more holistic understanding. We can kind of like give you that context and then boil it down to, okay, how can we potentially facilitate an introduction? And again, all that to say is like, if you see opportunity for yourself first, then you should chase it for sure. But happy to spend the time regardless on what the process is, and kind of like the operating principles that we have, as well as even some of the, maybe not the templates, but like the overall structure that we bring to the deliverables that we're giving to clients. And if you're like, I could do this, I'm going to go do that with those people, then by all means, again, like we're pretty open about it. I actually want us to share our templates and like full playbooks publicly anyways. So happy to go through that. So the order of operations, I can send that over. We can book a time in week and a half or so. And then we can talk more about what the specific process is with our team. And then from there, we're big advocates of like doing the work for others. So I'll basically put together pre-written messaging of how could you make that introduction, and then you layer in your own relational context as well to it. So yeah, that's the best order of operations. What do you think? Do you think that would be effective? Are you open to that?
Yeah, I think that that's perfect. I really like the last bit that you said because that's something that I try to do too. I picked that up from Melissa Moody because she's so good at it.
Mm,
She will write like the ICP ask of who exactly she's asking for, and then she'll give you like scripts, and then you're like, oh, and then you like give her the intro, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful smooth handoff. It's everyone's consented, before you do the intro, but like it's immaculate. So it's definitely a standard that I try to hold. Um, for more professional ones, like there are sometimes where I'm just like, hey, you two really should
yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
Um, But yes, I think that order of operations makes the most sense. It I do like that you have a list of like people, because that's really easy for me to be like, aha, yes. Or, I've been trying to get a hold of this person and they are just not responsive.
Mhm.
Because that happens too. So there's, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Nice. And yeah, they could either be guests on your podcast if you would have them, or
Yeah.
we can try and do the same for ourselves because we're spinning up our own series that I alluded to. Cool. I'll send that list over and then time to book with us, and then we will go from there. Is there anything else that I can do to help or make your day better?
No, but thank you for asking. Same, like, let me know. I mean, it's always a joy to talk about these things. So I appreciate the time that you've spent, and all of the time you spent doing the rest of it. I definitely know that is, time is valuable. So I appreciate it.
It's a give to me, so I appreciate the opportunity. And everyone likes talking about themselves. So when I get to share these ideas, obviously I geek out about it. So it feels good. It gets me energized for the rest of the day. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Wonderful. Well, have a good rest of your day, and I'll just keep my eyes out in my email.
Yep. Sounds
Okay.
good. We will
All
be
right.
talking again soon. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Thanks.
Bye.